Hey, I'm Rachel Billingsley.
And I'm Luke Billingsley, and this is GMT Talk, our insider podcast where we talk about all things GMT.
Today on GMT Talk, we'll be interviewing Ted Raicer, a very accomplished designer and a friend of GMT.
Ted has published 15 designs with GMT, including the critically acclaimed Paths of Glory. His newest design, Napoleon, was just released, and it is now shipping.
For this interview with Ted, we also have a couple special guests. You might know them, Gene Billingsley and Jason Carr. Enjoy. Hi, Ted. Thanks for being here. We appreciate the time you're taking to come and chat with us on GMT Talk.
I am thrilled to be here.
We're thrilled to have you.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Ted.
Before we start, I have to ask Gene, I've been wondering for like a year and a half now, you finally had a look at Napoleon. What do you think?
I'm having fun. So that's the bottom line, right?
Okay.
I see, I love, in fact, I'm going to ask you a question a little bit later about story immersion. I love games that immerse you in a story. And so I tried to get that with Mr. President. And
you did.
Rachel said to me the other day, she goes, Dad, this feels a little bit like Mr. President. And I was like, you're right. It does. It's not as hard as Mr. President in terms of all the different things you have to manage, but you get that same sense of you're immersed in a bigger story. You don't have enough resources to handle all the bad things that could happen. I like it, but what's going to matter is what do players think?
Sure.
So at least for this one player, I want to play it again. Rachel and I are in the middle of the first console. And we can't wait to get to Emperor. Although we almost lost last turn because Rachel, I'm putting it on her. She rolled really badly in the war against Russia.
That's
It's
right.
always about how Rachel rolls.
Yeah. So we almost died, and we used Napoleon's luck, and then we didn't. And I like that there's one, but only one. That's pretty cool. I like how you weaved the different parts of Napoleon's life, the things that you wouldn't normally see in a war game, right? That it's all there. He's a real person. I used to tell my kids all the time, they would come home from their history classes and go, Dad, history is so boring. Could you tell us what really happened at, whatever they were studying? And I would tell them history is not boring. It's history teachers that make history boring.
Yeah.
When you get one of those teachers that's really a coach and he's just teaching history and he stays like a day ahead of the kids in the book, because history is about people and people are inherently interesting. And so you've captured that in Napoleon in a way that I haven't seen in a war game. I know it's not a war game, but a conflict simulation type game, I haven't really seen that very often. And I try to go for a little of that same feel in Mr. President, where this is a real person that you're representing, but you've gone further than the public face of the person, and you've taken into effect maybe not all aspects of his life, but a lot of aspects of his life. And I find that very interesting.
Thank you. And that's why I still have hopes. I mean, obviously we'll see, but I still have hopes this might break out into the wider solo gamer community as opposed to the solo war gamer community.
I can see the solitaire games on your table list on Board Game Geek getting interested in this based on the way that it tells a story and the table presence, because they're really big in games like Spire's End and Above and Below and Seventh Continent, which all have that storytelling element.
Right.
And this game is produced to a level that I think it looks great on your table and it has that storytelling and immersion.
And I will tell you that, as with Mr. President, I think this game is as good or better with two playing together as it is with one.
That's great. I've only played it solo, but I could see that. I'm glad there are no thumbs down. Anyway.
I don't think that's what I said.
So ask me questions.
Absolutely.
Ted, I think I get the first question today.
Okay.
You know that I love games that immerse you in a story. And you also know that I've been around with your designs for GMT since the beginning, right? And so there's three games that strike me that they all immerse you in the story, but in different ways. So in Reds, I really get the feel that I'm in the Russian Civil War. and I can't put my finger on exactly why that is, but the random events that are there are a part of that. All right. So, and the unit differentiations too. The Paths of Glory, of course, is this monster game for us, one of our all-time bestsellers. And you create immersion there with a really clever way to use the cards and to sequence the cards in 3 sections, and then using event cards and, multifaceted choices for the player. But at the end of the day, you feel really immersed, like it's World War I. And then with your newest game, I, Napoleon, which we've been playing quite a bit lately, you achieve this immersion in a person's life, not just their public life, but a lot of their life, military, political, economic, personal. And so my question out of all that, so A, I'm a fan. I love that you've done that. But my question is, when you're looking at a new design, how do you take your I call them designer ninja foo tools to create the immersion, the story immersion that you want in a particular game?
Well, I think part of it is that I started with Avalon Hill back in the days when they were saying, now you are in command. And so there was always a sense of wargaming and gaming in general, the kind of games I like, as role-playing to begin with, without me ever actually getting into role-playing games, but that's another story. But so there was always an element for me of trying to make you, you are there kind of feeling.
Yeah.
And I've generally tried to do that in all my designs in one fashion or another, maybe not always successfully, but and I think for me the biggest way you do that is to not try and cover everything in detail. If you cover everything in detail, then particularly in a military simulation, you're wearing too many hats to think of yourself as one, one point of view. If I have to bring up all the supplies and count all the supply points, in addition to moving all my units, and then I have a separate set of rules for how headquarters work, and then I have another set of rules for how I bring in air support, and it's fine to cover all those things, but if they're all detailed, if they're all things that I have to do in depth, then who am I? Am I the supply officer? Am I the Air Force officer? Am I the commander in the field? Am I the general back at HQ? Who am I? And a lot of people love those kind of games, and that's fine. But they're not my sort. And I should point out that Mr. President, which I love, does not fall into that category, but it could have. And what keeps it from falling into that category is that amazing sequence of playbook, which basically handles all the detail for you. So I just wanted to say that there are ways of handling the detail that will still allow you for a particular point of view, but the hobby's never really seen anything like that I'm aware of, like that playbook before. So in a way, you've invented a new thing there.
That flip book is almost like your daily briefing, where your staff is bringing you everything that you have to deal with, and they've gone and done all the work, and they're just bringing you the decisions that you have to make.
Exactly.
That was suggested by, correct me if I'm wrong, Gene, that was suggested by Mike Berticelli and
Jordan and David,
Jordan Kerr. And that's based on something that some folks on BGG did for D-Day at Omaha Beach. So, innovation is all about borrowing the best ideas from other people and
always
building on them, right?
Yeah. So that's basically what I try and do. I try and decide what my point of view is, and I try and build the game around that. And of course, with I, Napoleon, it's all point of view. It's I, Napoleon.
Right.
So it kind of, figuring out how that was going to work was one thing, but I had the basic idea of it was in the title.
Right. So you talked about your history with Avalon Hill, and now you are in command and enjoying kind of that role-playing aspect without actually being a role-playing game. What inspired you and interested you in Napoleon to make this role-playing game about Napoleon's life?
Well, the original inspiration was a game from Clash of Arms called Legion of Honor. Yeah. And Legion of Honor puts you in the shoes of a sergeant or lieutenant in the Revolutionary Army, and you go through the Revolutionary and Napoleonic periods, and maybe, it's very rare, but maybe you can rise up to be a Marshal of France. And it's you can play it solo, but it's really a multiplayer game because a lot of it has to do with the players, fighting duels with one another and stealing each other's mistresses and gambling. The actual history part, you don't have much choice in. You get assigned to an army, you go through the historic battles, and basically you roll dice, and basically the only decision you have to make is whether you're going to be a coward or a hero, which affects your, how much you earn for being in that battle, and also your chances of being wounded, captured, or killed. But that's basically your only decision. Every battle you just decide, I'm going to be brave this battle, or I'm not going to be brave this battle. I'm going to be Flashman, or I'm going to be not Flashman. But the basic idea when I was playing it, and I enjoyed it solo, but it's, as I said, it's really more a multiplayer game. I said, what if instead of an ordinary sergeant or lieutenant, you were captain of artillery, Napoleon Bonaparte? And that was really where the idea came from. My interest in Napoleon is longstanding. I've been reading books on Napoleon since I was, 12. But the idea of that you can make a game out of someone's life, starting from 1793, when he's basically a nobody, but about to enter on history's stage at Toulon, up until, whatever happens, depending on how the game goes.
Yeah.
So that was the basic inspiration for the game.
Cool.
But I have to say it was inspired by Clash of Arms, Legion of Honor. There's very little of Legion of Honor in the actual game, in the actual mechanics, beyond the basic idea of following an individual life. And that's partly because I wanted to emphasize different things, and I came up with different mechanical ideas. And it's partly because Napoleon is not an ordinary sergeant or lieutenant, and the life he led was, had a scope that goes way beyond anything in Legion of Honor.
Right.
Yeah. Ted, you're talking about Napoleon not being an ordinary person. I think the game conveys that really well, that his life was unusual in a lot of aspects, especially for someone who lived at that time. Can you talk a little bit about how you balanced showing how extraordinary his life was with not falling prey to the great man theory of history? Like, what did you do to show how Napoleon was ordinary as well?
I mean, first of all, let me say that whether I reject the great man theory of history depends on what you mean by that.
Sure.
I certainly reject the idea that, someone comes out of nowhere and just creates history and can do whatever they want without restraint. But I also reject the idea that, everybody has an equal effect on history. There are people who we all operate within the world in which we're born, but there are people who take that world and bend it in directions it wouldn't have gone if they hadn't been there. Something similar might have happened, but not the same. There might have been a World War II without Hitler. There wouldn't have been a Holocaust. There might have been a French military dictatorship without Napoleon, but it wouldn't have evolved the way Napoleon's dictatorship did. It wouldn't have, history would have gone in other directions if someone else had done the job.
Right.
And it's also that, and I hope this comes out in the game. This is one of the ways I hope in which I show that Napoleon didn't have to end up Napoleon, is that there were probably a lot of potential Napoleons out there who got hit by that bullet, who got hit by that shell, who got, murdered by a jealous husband, who came down with plague or typhus, or, Napoleon was the one who didn't. He was the one who didn't succumb to all those things. He was not the only person with talent. He was not the only person with ambition, but he was the one who lived.
Right.
And there are a lot of people like that in history. I think about Churchill that way. Churchill had so many opportunities to die before he became Churchill, including being hit by a taxi cab in New York. It's just the great men are not simply the ones who accomplish great things. They're the ones who survived to accomplish great things.
Yeah, that definitely comes through when you play. The number of ways that you can meet an unfortunate end. And also, I think the number of things that are out of your control that you then have to take advantage of. For example, the people who are around who will support you against the directory is different in every game. And you have to take advantage of the ones who are there and maybe use some luck to make sure that they are around. But you are not in control of that. That is a stage that is set that you walk onto.
Exactly. And as commander, you have actually far less agency than you do as first council and emperor. Things happen to you all the way through that you can't control. There are plenty of other actors on the European stage, but as commander, you're a commander. You start out as a captain quickly / major of artillery, and then you become a general. But even when you're a general. There are a lot of generals, and you may be able to, with connections or by pretending to be sick, get out of a command you don't want. But sooner or later, you're going to have to take a command, and if you don't want it, tough luck. You're a general. You have to do it. You could be arrested for reasons that you have no control over. They're all, you just don't have a lot of agency as commander. You have some agency, but you don't have a lot, especially compared to later on. And you never at any point in the game have complete agency.
No. Yeah. And I thought that was really important to show players that there is a limit to what you can do biographically playing as this person, that he lived through a lot of time periods where he was not in control, and that's important to the model of the game and to your perspective on what agency means. So I really appreciated that when I was playing.
Good. I'm glad.
I definitely think it comes through, in the gameplay experience. At least for me, I've only played half a game, to be fair, but just when you're a general early on, we almost died by being arrested, I think once or twice. And we almost died doing the Austria campaign. We almost died because of the Pitchegru conspiracy. I think I said that wrong, but I don't know. And there was something else that we almost died that Dad knows about. I don't know. But there are multiple things that I think, wow, had he not survived, he wouldn't have done any of this. So I think your what you said about that really makes sense, and it comes through in the game. I like that a lot.
You're also more likely to. There are opportunities to die later, but you're more likely to die as a commander than you are as a first council or emperor, because you're right there on the front lines a lot of the time, and you're also again subject to other people's decision making. And I wanted that to come out in the game. But my feeling was, if you die as commander, you haven't played that long. You're not that far into it. It's not that big a deal to start over.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Rachel was like, Dad, what are we going to do? If we die like a year into the game, I said, we're going to set it up again.
Yeah.
But, we stink at being Napoleon. That's all.
It's true. The luck saved us, to be fair, at least twice. Is that based on something historical?
Well, that depends, I guess, on whether you believe in such a thing as luck. But I think the real point is that Napoleon believed in such a thing as luck. He used to ask when an officer was up for promotion, he didn't ask, is he competent? That was assumed. He asked, is he lucky?
Wow. Okay.
And if you look at his career, if there is such a thing as luck, he certainly seemed to have it on many occasions.
Right.
So I wanted to have that as an element in the game. I wanted to have, an ability to luck out, as it were. But it's only something you can count on, once a year. It's and there are usually going to be more than once a year when you wish you could count it.
Right.
Definitely.
So, Ted, when you're thinking about earlier you talked about one of the ways that you help immerse people is you choose what you're going to leave out, right? That if you try to put too much in, it actually breaks the immersion. So with I, Napoleon, how did you choose which things you wanted to include and which things you decided not to?
Well, there are two different elements to that. The first, in terms of the events, it was basically, I have an expansion if it proves justifiable for you people, all almost done. It all lined up, and that's because there were Napoleon led the kind of life. It's said, I don't know if it's true, but it's said that more has been written about Napoleon than anyone except Jesus.
Oh, wow.
And he led the kind of life that there were so many things that it was a matter of, all right, this has to go in. I'd like this to go in, but it'll have to wait for an expansion because there are only so many cards I can get in right now. So there was that element of deciding what, so like there are only two mistresses that show up in the game, the ones that had his children. I had a lot of other mistresses. In the expansion, they'll come back. And by the way, for the expansion, I'm gonna include a new card draw track because you will, so that the new cards don't push out the old cards. You will draw more cards.
Okay.
It'll be a longer game, but it's an expansion.
We like the card draw part, and not just because it helps drive the story, but because they bring with them decision points.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
So more is better from my point of view.
Okay. The other thing about what to leave out was a matter of not leaving out, but not covering in detail, and that was the details of military campaigns, first of all, but also domestic politics and also diplomacy. You could make a separate game on each of those things. Easily, and so I had to find a way to cover all those things, but to cover them in a way that that didn't put a burden on the player, because I wasn't, I didn't have the when I designed this, I didn't have the example of the flip book from Mr. President, so I didn't know you could do that. I wanted something, that was quick and easy to do and easy to remember. Once you've done it a couple of times, you would never have to look it up again. And that became a matter of, well, what are the outcomes of battles? What are the possibilities in a Napoleonic campaign of a battle? And basically, you could have a bloody defeat where you're defeated and your army is really damaged, Or you could have a defeat where you don't win the battle, but your army is basically okay. Or you could have a stalemate or a bloody stalemate. Or you could have a bloody victory where you won, but you really paid a price for it. Or you could have a battle where you just smashed the enemy and you didn't pay that high a price. And once I determined those were the possible outcomes, then I looked at the historical record and made a rough estimate of how many fell into each category. I adjusted that a little bit for play's sake. And I came up with a system where you roll the dice and you get one of these outcomes. And then I could put in all the detail of battle, the enemy's actions, the enemy commanders, your actions, simply as die roll modifiers to affect that outcome. And then by limiting the plus die roll modifier to a maximum of +4, I make it so you can never absolutely guarantee you're going to win. You can make it so you're probably going to win, and Napoleon won most of his battles. But there's always the chance of a stalemate. And that if you didn't save reserves, if you don't have commanders that you held back or tactics that you held back in reserve, that can quickly spiral into defeat.
Yeah, that second round will kill you.
Mm-hmm.
So you always have that decision in the first round. Do I go for the maximum +4 in the first round, even if that means I have nothing left for the second round? Or do I go for a +3 and hold somebody back for that second round?
Yeah, which is one of the most interesting choices in the game. That, and do I save my luck to try to mitigate a die roll during the battle?
Yes,
all
Jason,
of the management of commanders and everything. Yeah, you should. You don't want the stray bullet to take you out. Right? So speaking about an expansion, is there anything you can kind of tease that you might be putting in there? So you mentioned the mistresses, but I'm curious, like, what else you're thinking about that would be covered in an expansion?
Well, I'd like to cover a little more of areas where Napoleon could have gone in a very different direction that I touched on in the original, but I just didn't have the cards to go into depth on. And one of those major ones is the Americas. If Napoleon had succeeded in Haiti, I very much doubt he would have sold Louisiana. And that would have created, a clash between the new United States and the French, because I don't think the new United States would have been too happy about, Napoleonic France owning that much of the Americas. And that's covered in the game in terms of you can do a Louisiana campaign, but it's covered very lightly. I would like to go into some more depth there if that happens. There are also, speaking of depth, there are a handful of cards I would redo in the expansion to give you more choices. And then there are simply other areas of his life that weren't touched on at all. Like Napoleon was a extremely able gardener and spent a lot of time and money and effort creating great gardens around his palaces, and also gardening on St. Helena. There's not a card for that. I would like at least a card for that. There's an entire book that deals with Napoleon's life in terms of his gardening.
Wow. Didn't know that.
And so there are all kinds of things like that. They're not, they're not gonna. Most of them are not gonna, turn the game around. The Americans thing has potential to have a major effect, but most of them aren't going to turn the game around. But they're going to add a lot more flavor and a lot more choices and a lot more things that can happen to you. And I just think it would. There's room in his life for more.
That sounds great.
So there's not gonna be a Napoleon comes back from exile, takes his newly raised army, and has them tour all of his gardens. They get really inspired. They get like +4 at the Battle of Waterloo.
Well, Probably not. There is another possibility for the Americas, though, that will be included in an expansion, which is that after Waterloo, Napoleon could have escaped to the Americas. His brother did on the frigate he refused to get on. He spent too much time trying to make up his mind what to do, and the frigate that was waiting for him left with his brother. And by the time another frigate arrived, the British had arrived, and he wasn't going anywhere. So there'll be the opportunity there for him to escape into exile in America. Wow. And some cards dealing with his life after that. That's not the same as, him being emperor and commanding an army in Louisiana, but it would be interesting to think of Napoleon in exile in the young United States.
The American gardener.
Yeah.
I love it. So it sounds like there's a lot of potential avenues for you to explore in an expansion. I'm also curious, the system itself is very flexible. Are there any other historical figures you've thought about as potential sequels?
Many, and three in particular that I'm kind of simultaneously working on, all three, to see which falls into place first. The three that I'm working on are Nicholas II of Russia, the last Tsar, FDR, and Elizabeth I.
Oh, very cool.
And let me explain for a second why those three. Nicholas II is the anti-Napoleon. He's somebody who did almost everything wrong. But he didn't do everything wrong for no reason. He did everything wrong because of the belief that had been instilled in him by his teachers, by his father, by Russian history, in autocracy. And so my idea in a game on him is that autocracy is sort of the glory for my Napoleon of Nicholas's life. But it's the thing you want above all to get is to hold on to autocracy. But the more you do that, the more you hurt yourself everywhere else. So you're going to have a constant choice of, do I do what's good for Russia, or do I do what's good for autocracy? And I like that idea of and sort of a player being divided between these two selves, the people who are coming to you with advice saying, do this for Russia and do this for Russia and do this for Russia. And the people who are coming to you and saying, no, if you do that, you won't be the Tsar autocrat anymore. And historically, 9 times out of 10, Nicholas went with the guy who said, no, you won't be the Tsar autocrat. But you as player will be able to make that decision, but you'll pay for it. If you do all the wonderful for Russia things, you are no longer the Tsar autocrat, and that costs you in terms of winning the game.
Whoa.
Very cool.
So that's Nicholas. With FDR, what I find fascinating is that you have 3 distinct stories. The first story is the overcoming of polio. The second story is the overcoming the depression, or not overcoming it, but containing it to a degree that America is able to function and doesn't fall into chaos or dictatorship. And then the third act is winning World War II. So you have, and you have, as a knight Napoleon, you have a political element. You're going to have to run for election every 4 years. You're first going to have to get elected president, and then you're going to have to run every 4 years. And then you have your personal elements, Eleanor, your relationship with Eleanor, your relationship with your mistress, who he did not see for years, but he did see again in the last 2 years of his presidency. Your relationship with your family, who were quite a handful, the relationship with the Democratic Party, which was split between the liberals and the Dixiecrats, your relationship with the world. There's a lot of meat there. for an FDR life. And then Elizabeth is fascinating because, like Napoleon, there was a good chance that she would die before she got to be queen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are all these, you know, she's got a Catholic sister on the throne who doesn't like her. There are all these, you know, there are all these Catholic plots against her. You know, she fought a battle of survival, you know, basically her entire career. Even at the very end, there was a revolt that was in her name, but actually against her power. So there's a lot of fun stuff in Elizabeth's life too. So I'm reading about. I know enough about FDR, Nicholas II. I'm reading more about Elizabeth I. But I'm making cards for all these and thinking about how the systems would work and which one, perhaps I'll do all three in the end, but which one will get done first is basically a matter of which one turns out to be the easiest to design, which one falls together first. Can I also say about the system that I don't want anyone else touching these three subjects, but there are plenty of subjects out there, you know, like people online have been saying Julius Caesar. I think Julius Caesar would be a great choice.
Definitely.
But I don't know enough about ancient Rome to do it. And I don't want to spend the time learning. So, you know, if someone else wants to take this system and do I Julius Caesar or I Augustus or whoever, you know, that's fine with me. I'm just reserving these three.
That was going to be my follow-up question because I was imagining that Volko was watching this interview and going, when's Gene going to ask him about where else he could take this? and I don't just mean like other like figures. So, I mean, for me, one would be Teddy Roosevelt would have a lot of parallels to I, Napoleon and would be easy to fit in. But like you say, it's got to be something you want to do. But if we had other people that wanted to come in and as has been done with the coin series and various other series we've done, do you think this would port outside of the military? For example, I, Babe Ruth, I, Jackie Robinson, I, Martin Luther, I, Brigham Young, I, Sam Houston. There's a little bit of military in some of those, but could you go outside of the military with the same idea and systemically look at the lives of other people in a way that would be fun for a board game?
I think so. I think, you know, I don't see why not, as long as it's an interesting life and interesting to the designer.
Yeah. I mean, you know, John Kennedy, I would love to see a game like that, right?
I mean, the system, you know, you can adjust it any way you want. All the coin games are not the same. But I think the basic idea of building a game around an individual's life, I don't see that really has any limitations to it.
Yeah.
So Jason's a Pittsburgh Pirate fan forever and ever. And I just have to say this because this is a person whose life I have so much respect for. Roberto Clemente, right?
Yeah,
I mean, if you're going to do a sports game, that would be awesome.
I'll leave that to someone else. I don't know enough about sports, but yeah, I think you could easily. And if you look at, you know, somebody like FDR, although there's World War II, and he played an important role in that, he was not a battlefield commander. He was not primarily a military leader. His life is politics. Queen Elizabeth, you know, dealt with the Spanish Armada, but again, she wasn't a military leader. There weren't a lot of big campaigns in the Elizabethan era. You know, there were some, but the military wasn't the focus of her reign. Staying on the throne and holding together a Protestant England with a still large Catholic majority was the focus of her reign. You know, so in a way, we're already going outside the military sphere.
Yeah, power politics are a war game all their own, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, so I you know, like I said, I am totally fine with other people taking this idea and running with it, provided they just ask me first, so that they're not taking a subject I want to get to later. That's all.
And that's something we would insist on at GMT. Anytime people do follow-on games in a series, we always require that they get the permission of the designer of the original series.
So, but if I'm not planning to do, if that's not a topic I see myself doing, I'll say yes. Yeah. And that goes for any of my systems.
Well, speaking of your other systems,
mm-hmm.
Do you have ideas for another dark series game?
It is proving to be a tough nut to crack, but I'm determined to crack it. I've been working for a couple of years now on a World War II Pacific game called The Dark Seas.
Ooh.
And parts of it I have got down, but the overall picture I'm still working on. Like I said, it's a tough nut, not least because I've never done a naval, a game with a lot of any sort with a lot of naval before.
Yeah.
In Pacific there is land stuff, but it's mostly naval air, and I've never done that. So, I'm working my way, reading a lot of books on that, on ships and planes and to put that together. So I can't say when that nut will be cracked, but it is one I'm determined to crack. So sooner or later there will be The Dark Seas.
All right.
Cool.
That's cool. I'm still thinking about different people could be named. Wouldn't it be cool if you could come up with a way to do a financial game called I, Warren Buffett? That would be awesome.
Or I, Rockefeller. Go back
I, Rockefeller.
Oh.
I, William Randolph Hearst.
Yeah.
You could do any of the. Yeah.
Although Orson Welles already did I, Randolph Hearst. So.
Yeah. True.
So yeah, I don't, I think the system has a lot of promise, and I hope to have a follow-up to you before the year is out.
Nice.
Oh, that's exciting.
Well, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
So we'll see, and we'll see. I mean, like I said, my hope when I was doing this was that this game and this series could break out among the more general gaming population. And I have no idea. I've had no idea all along. I'm not an expert in the field. It's simply been a hope. But if it happens.
And something else that we've seen with the coin series, it's a crossover. You might not be able to call it a massive, bestseller across outside of the war game genre, but it's a really good seller for us. Something we learned is that it wasn't always the first game that really caught the imagination. I mean, maybe it will be. Maybe it'll be Napoleon. But if you've got a solid series and you've got passion for topics, which you do, then you never know. I mean, I would not have ever predicted that Cuba Libre would be the one that opened the doors to the coin series, because I didn't know Cuba Libre was even going to be a coin game. It wasn't on our initial list of games that we thought about doing.
Yeah. So, I mean, if I Napoleon just as well in GMT terms, I'll be happy. I'm not trying to. Absolutely. I'm just saying that I have thought all along there's a chance that the solo gamers who don't normally game historical topics might get into it just from the storytelling aspect. But we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a representative of everyone, but I'm not a war gamer, and I really enjoyed it. So, I mean.
Well, good. Be a representative of everyone.
Okay, great. I will.
So anything else?
You got any questions for us, Ted?
No, I assume GMT is holding together all right. And you've already told me that, you have plans for the day you retire.
Yes.
So
and I told you I really like I, Napoleon. So
yeah.
I do have a question. I just thought
Sure.
of it. Reds. So you probably got my.
That is the proper way to say the name.
I really like Reds. Okay, and it's been out of stock now for, I don't know, 10 years plus. You ever have any thought about doing an enhanced designer edition of that game?
I mean, I already said that I would put together some additional, an additional scenario, a shorter scenario that started when the action is. Right now, the short scenario is early on. I would do a short scenario that started when things started heating up and carried to the end of, say, 1919, say 1918, 1919, a 1918, 1919 scenario. I haven't really thought about it in terms of, changing the systems or anything.
Don't do that. They're good.
Yeah. All I thought about was, adding some more, another basic scenario. And, if it was wanted, I could add additional random events, but that's, that's the only thing that comes to mind.
Well, I'm going to channel Richard Berg for just a second. God rest his soul. You can never have too many random events.
Okay.
Gene put that to the test with Mr. President. He was I'm going to prove that this is true.
And it's true.
Apparently it's true.
It is true. So yeah, I can do that if it's wanted.
Cool. I will say, Ted, you were talking about Mr. President and I, Napoleon earlier. You achieved something in I, Napoleon that I really struggled with in Mr. President. The hardest part of Mr. President is the war stuff. And it's the part that people have the most trouble with. And I try to make this really simple war system, right? And it is, right up until you figure out like what happens if you win or lose a war. Rachel's going, it's not simple. It's an odd-based, really easy odd-based, I thought, smart CRT. But what happened to us is then what happens when you win or lose? And there's so many conditions in the world and there's so many countries that we've got this massive chart that goes like 3 pages of all the things that you do if you win or lose. And so you are very clear in what happens in I, Napoleon at the different levels of victory. So my hat's off to you. That's something that I struggled getting done.
Thank you. That was, like I said, that was kind of the key to making the whole thing work, was coming up with a combat system that was easy and didn't take too long, because Napoleon spent a lot of time campaigning. He didn't spend all his time campaigning, but he spent a lot of time campaigning. And I just didn't want something that would take too long. And I have to say, Gene, that Mr. President got my vote for the best game of last year, and I'm glad it didn't come out this year to compete with Napoleon.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Ted. So we're almost to the end of our interview, but we like to ask every designer we interview these questions, just 2. Sure. The first of which, do you have a favorite game by another GMT designer?
I have a couple. One is Mr. President, and I'm not saying that just to get a raise.
Likely story.
Although I'll take a raise, but I wasn't what I was saying. The other is The Hunters by Greg Smith.
Yeah.
That's a game that, with very simple mechanics, really has you feeling the role-playing aspect, really has you feeling, you don't have a lot of agency, you don't have a lot of decisions, but U-boat captains didn't have all that much agency and that many decisions. They had a job to do and they went to do it. But you have a career, you have a sense of, of progress or not progress, or you have a sense of your life as a U-boat captain, like I said, I got into I've always seen games from the point of view of telling a story, and The Hunters tells a terrific story.
Yeah, it does, as do virtually all of your games, Ted. So.
Thank you. You said there were 2 questions?
Yes.
Yes. The other one is, who are a few people in the hobby who've had a positive influence on you as a game designer or just as a gamer?
Well, Mark Herman is first because, Paths of Glory would not exist without We the People. We the People came up, and my first thought was to do a Civil War version of We the People. And then Mark said, I'm doing a Civil War version of We the People. I had done all these World War I games for Command, and I thought, well, can I make a World War I game with this system? And my first thought was no, because it's, linear warfare, not the kind of warfare you have in the Civil War and We the People. And then I thought, you can do it. So
you did it.
So Mark Herman for We the People, obviously. I've also been influenced a lot by Jim Dunnigan. I read his book many, many years ago on wargame design, and I took to heart a lot of his, simplify, choose one area. A game can have one area of detail, and that's fine, but it can't have 9 areas of detail. And of course it can, and some people love those games. But for me, absent that flip book, if you have all that level of detail, I just can't handle it. He had a saying called, which he may have gotten from Redmond Simonson, I forget, but called "Cow comes out in the wash," and and he would say, simplify this, it'll come out in the wash. And that sort of became the guiding principle of all my game designing, of find a way, come up with something complex and then boil it down to its essence. And then eventually I got to the point where I didn't have to make it complex to boil it down. I could just start with a simpler version. Let's see, who else? Richard Berg was an influence on me, simply in that he was great company. And, there were moments when I was, after SPI went under and where I was losing interest in the hobby because, not much was coming out. And I would run into Berg at conventions and talk to him, and I would always come away rejuvenated, feeling like, the hobby still has life in it. Richard was just a fun person to be around. Whether you agreed with him, whether you liked his designs, he was just, a character. And the other, I have to say, is Ty Bomba and Chris Perello at Command, who got my first, gave me my first 5 published designs, and trusted me when I was literally nobody. So those are the names that come to mind. There were many more people who've had an influence on me. This is a hobby of, where designers constantly, we look at other designers' games to learn, and also to have fun very often, but to learn. And, there's probably no game I've ever, even games I didn't like, that I didn't learn something from, if only what I didn't want to do. So.
You said you were a nobody, from nobody to accomplished game designer. Ted Raicer.
Thank you, but I'll leave that to somebody else to design.
That's great. Well, that's all the time we have today for GMT Talk. But thanks so much, Ted, for coming to talk to us and being our guest. It's been really fun.
Thank you, and see you all again sometime.
All right, Ted.
That's good.
Thanks. We'll see you.
Thanks.
See you next time on GMT Talk.